Valerie here. Good morning. Good morning. It's Valerie. Hi there. Assuming I'm live. Good morning. Valerie here. I think I am now live. Okay. Good morning. So, I'm just not a fan of the self-care movement. I fundamentally have an issue with it. And I've been sitting and stewing on this one because I've just been irritated. You know, I write articles and people ask me questions, and my whole feed is cluttered now with self-care stuff, right? So I am going to be absolutely honest with you and say the self-care movement has always irritated me. Here's why. In general, why the self-care movement irritates me. Self-care, I think, has become equated like this vanilla pill that we all need to take as the remedy to the busyness, to the strain, to the stretch of life. Okay, self-care. And I just don't think that's it. That's not it at all. Right. So self-care as a movement is a proactive, disciplined, purpose-driven space to be in, of which rest, soothing, and pacing are important elements in self-care. There are also elements to self-care thinking that is fairly purpose-driven and fairly active, recognizing the resources that need to be filled up, proactively seeking to problem solve and look to fill that up. Russell, you've been waiting for me to explode on this. Oh, brother, I've been sitting for weeks with this, right? And this morning, I just said to Josh at work, I was like, I'm so triggered. I have to figure out what's going on, what's triggering me. And I think it's this. Self-care is a movement that came out of the civil rights era, where generally women were advocating for the ability to access medical help, the ability to have equal rights with regards to taking care of themselves, right? And over the years, self-care has just become this vanilla thing that we just go to when we say, when times are hard, self-care. All right, I fundamentally have an issue with this. The reason why I fundamentally have an issue with this, especially during these times, is that the reason why we struggle with not doing has got very little to do, well, has got something to do with the way that we care for ourselves, but a lot to do with how we've programmed what we think we should do. So the software that propels us, and then the expectations that we have of ourselves. And one of the things that I'm noticing in this pandemic is how some of the people that I work with in the burnout space are actually struggling with one of the areas, which is a sense of achievement and meaning, right? And here's why I have a problem with the self-care movement. If you only look at stopping, soothing as being the antidote for the next, 3 months, 9 months, we will deplete the meaning and achievement tank, and we will experience existential type problems, which is what's the point? Why am I here? I'm feeling so flat. I'm losing my shape, right? My daughter last night said to me, Mom, I'm in real danger of actually becoming a recluse, a hermit, and I will not know how to integrate back with the world when this all finishes. And here's the thing, as human beings, we are fundamentally goal-driven. Goal, G-O-A-L. Some of us are gold-driven. That's another talk. We're fundamentally goal-driven. And so if the only thing we're attending to is pull back, stop, self-care, if that's the only thing, we will not be able then to figure out how to be goal-driven during this time. So here's the thing. As part of a resourcing model, the self-care piece fits. But can I suggest that really, for those of us who are experiencing a kind of a burn of what is this meaning for me, the self-care piece is really a self-compassionate piece. So I would prefer to actually turn that and say it's got to do with self-compassion, right? We've got to look at the expectations that we have of ourselves, of our work, the quality of our work, the quality of our relationships, what home life looks like right now. We've actually got to have some compassion about that and moderate those expectations, okay? They're not going to look like what it was before. The house will not look the way it was before. Our relationships will not look the way before. Those things, we need to have self-compassion. Number one. So in the self-care piece, you have self-compassion, which means that we moderate our expectations for how much we can achieve, how much of the normal we will retain, and how much of the new we have to innovate. And then comes the pacing, because every time there's change, it does impact us. So turn it to self-compassion. Number two, we still need to be goal directed, right? Otherwise, we're going to get into a sense of emptiness because we haven't been able to figure out what the new normal looks like, given that everything that we do has tilted, right? We still want to be goal directed. Now, as psychologists, that goal direction, often when I work with people with high expectations of themselves, has been pretty much narrowly focused in the area to which that gives them identity, whether it's as a worker, whether it's as a parent, whether it's as a teacher. That's where they tend to focus their goal direction, and that can produce burnout. Now, because we're not getting feedback right now whether this area is doing okay, this is the time for us to expand goal-directed thinking into a few different areas. What is the one thing I want to see out of this pandemic in my personal growth? What is the one thing I want to see out of this pandemic in terms of my health, in terms of the way that I serve others, in my family relationships, in my friendships, in my health, in my sense of, what are these different areas? Growth, education, right? You can see a plethora of things being offered right now. This is the other thing that really bugs me. I don't like people who are opportunistic, and maybe I'm one of them. Who knows? There's a plethora of things that people are saying, oh, do this, do this, do this. This is going to help you in the pandemic. This is going to help you do this, do this, do this. And like, hello, for what? That's the what, the how, but nobody's giving us the why. So here's the why. Because as human beings, these different areas hold us in gravity, right? A sense of growth, a sense of our health, our relationships, where we're serving. And then, of course, what is the one thing we want to see happen out of the pandemic in terms of our work life, right? So being goal-orientated is still quite important. The third thing that I want to say is when you figure out what those things are, and this is probably a really hard thing to hear, but here's what I want to say, right? Effective living, that's the name of the private practice that I run. Effective living and not effective soothing. The reason why I have a practice called the Center for Effective Living is because we subscribe to a whole of life point of view. Life is going to continue after the pandemic, right? And we want to grow through this. We want to groan through this as well. And what I mean by that is we want to groan through this as in we do want to express that it's difficult and it's sad and it's confronting. We also want to grow out of this so that when life returns to, well, not returns, but post-pandemic, we will actually have felt a sense of, man, that was a clarifying experience, right? That was a really clarifying experience. It's actually given me so much more focus now to figure out what life really looks like now. Okay, so I would encourage us to then have realistic expectations of what that looks like, Joanna, I'll come back to your comment because I think it's really important. It looks meaty there. Okay. I've been saying more and more in my sessions with my clients is you still want to be goal directed. you still want to have one thing in these areas that you're recasting and saying, the one thing I want to see is this in these different areas. But then you want to come down to the most common denominator, the simplest expression of that. Because those of us who are high achieving, burning out, now we will want to take those goals and make them into a musical production, right? You want to say, okay, the one thing I want to do with my neighbors is I want them to know that we're in this together and we can all look forward to having a street party, right? The expression of that could be, well, now I'm going to source 15 toilet rolls for every house down the street. I'm going to stand out there with my cup every morning at 9 o'clock, and I'm going to, yeah. No, say no to that, because that will bring you back to I need to now self-care. Do you see where I'm going with this? It's like this vicious cycle. So you want to come down to the simplest expression at this point in time to be realistic and for self-compassion. What is the simplest expression of that goal? So let me give you a couple of concrete examples. I can only do it with myself, so I don't breach confidentiality, of what this looks like. Okay. Self-compassion for me as a parent of two children in school holiday mode. And I got to tell you, I feel like my kids have taken to this period like ducks to water. And I know that that is not the norm, right? But I am thinking about, what is the goal for them for this next 3 months? And I think for me, the goal in this next 3 months is actually to have them to be able to be gracious with their friends and with their teachers during this next 3 months. And of course, with themselves, because I am noticing that teachers are burning out. And I think it's a thankless job. And I think that it's very, very difficult for for other people to know what it's like to actually manage a class online like this and dealing with the uncertainty. Okay, so the one thing I want my kids to come out of this next 3 months is a keener appreciation for the teachers, for their teachers, and to be able to express gratitude and to take ownership of what that means, right? What does that mean? What's the simplest expression of that? Believe it or not, this is what I think for my kids, the school holidays is, what is the simplest expression of that? Well, if you have a craft idea, or if you have a message idea, or you can write, how can we thank our teachers during this school holidays? How can we be diligent in our classwork? How can we put on in our headspace something that actually says, my teachers are probably having a really hard time. This would be important for them. Something like that, okay? One thing for the kids. What's the one thing that I would love for our psychology practice to be able to come out of this in the next 3 months? And really the message is that we're in this together. We got each other's back, right? We've got each other's back. And that includes the people that we serve, right? So let's not have a conversation about whether we buy 5 more boxes of pens because that's going to cut costs, or should we put this form online, whatever. What is the one thing that our community knows, that when the storm came, we're all in the same boat and we're doing this together? What is the simplest expression of that? What is the simplest expression of that? And we've got a couple of things that we're looking at. How about for me as an individual, as a human being? What do I want to be able to see for myself, in the next 3 months? Well, I got a couple of things in those areas, right? I got a couple of things. For me, my spiritual life is very, very, very important to me. It gives me purpose. It gives me the one thing that I want to see out of this is that I actually take the time to discover what it is when you've got nowhere to go and nowhere to be, really. There's a lot of chaos at home. How do I have the simplest expression of what it means to have hope in a higher power beyond me? What is the simplest expression of that? And really for me right now, it's even 10 minutes outside where nobody is, the dog isn't there, the human beings aren't there, really nutting down to that. So, Joanna, I've been thinking about this very topic in terms of occupation. I am an OT, and shifting our supports towards supporting occupational roles in this strange time, the occupation of parenting, being a friend, rather than here is another yoga YouTube channel you can watch, here are some fun motor activities. Yes, songs that, yes, I totally agree with that. I've, I'm with you there. So, it does boil down to the one thing, or even for some of us, what is the one skill that we needed to develop during this pandemic that we've discovered that is an important growth area? Um, or even, this idea that we can't exert control over what's happening to us. So switch off from the news and don't watch that. 100%. That has got to do with linked with anxiety. So this is my other thing. Like, we've got to understand the functions. Like, why are we saying to people don't do this? Well, it's for this reason, but doesn't mean that it solves the other reason. So yes, cutting down on viewing the news and social media helps with anxiety, right? Because our anxiety increases when we have a heightened sense of probability of risk, impending risk. And so the more news we get and we're exposed to it like 5, 6 times a day, will heighten our evaluation of risk, right? However, all of us have a human need, a human goal, an existential need to feel like in times of crisis, we are contributing some way, right? So when we're not looking at the news, that's for our anxiety, but disconnecting completely from the issue is also not realistic, right? So what is the one way I can contribute to a need to serve others or to be connected with others? So take the neighbor idea. Is it the simplest expression of that? Is the simplest expression of that adopt one neighbor, get their number, and have a WhatsApp conversation and be able to say, look, if you run out of this or if you run out of that, I'm your go-to. Why don't we tag team? When I go to the grocery, I'll WhatsApp you and say, do you have anything missing from your list? And then bring that back in, right? So I'm going to finish now. So I was saying that I have a fundamental issue with the self-care movement because I consider it to be somewhat unthinking in where it sits. In my thoughts, self-care at this point in time equates to self-compassion, which is to be realistic about what the new normal looks like, which is to have pacing, to understand that some of our resources are being taxed, particularly our cognitive resources. A lot of people are saying they're tired. The reason why we're tired is because there's a lot more needing to innovate and fill up the spaces. And so, more sleep and all of that, power to that. I'm loving more sleep right now. So let's focus on self-compassion in terms of thinking how we can moderate our expectations and pace. But number 2, we are still fundamentally goal-oriented human beings, and we've got to be careful that the self-care movement doesn't then push us to feel like there's now not a lot for us to achieve in the next 3 months. We just kind of have to sort of float for 3 months until we get back. We're still goal directed. So what is the one thing in these key areas that make us feel like we're moving and growing as a human being that in this next 3 months I keep saying 3 months, but who knows how long it would be, that would give us a sense that yes, we are having a meaningful goal directed space to be in. And then number 3, what is the simplest expression of what we can do towards that goal? That's got to do with self-compassion. We don't want to go like gangbusters on having unrealistic expectations of what that means. And that I think for me, the self-care movement can get in the way of us figuring out the second part, the goal-directed living, because the third part, the simplest expression of how we achieve that, can be misunderstood as that's unnecessary right now. But in fact, what's probably happening is because we don't have number 1, which is self-compassion, what we're expecting ourselves to do in number 2 and 3 is actually unhelpful and unrealistic. So if we can get down to the simplest expression of what that looks like, lock it in, try it for a week, beta test it, then try something else if it's not quite ticking the box for you. Alrighty, thanks for watching. Lovely hearing from you, Russ and Joe. Catch you later.